Math 3, Unit 6, Section 9. Today we are talking about solving and graphing radical equations. So we want to see how both work. Okay, we've been doing both through this unit. So you should be able to do this. Okay, so we're showing how we can get the answer algebraically and then doing the same problem on a graph and seeing that the answers match. Okay, so we are going to start here on the algebraic side. We want to solve for x. So when you are doing this, we always want to get the absolute value, or not absolute value, the square root by itself. Is this root by itself? Yes, do you guys see that? How the root's by itself? How do I eliminate the root? You square both sides. Very good. So when I square a square root, the root goes away, and we have x plus 2 equals x squared. What will I do now? We even did a problem like this in our opener today. Yeah, we have to move the x plus 2 to the other side because anytime we have a squared term, we are going to do what? Starts with an F. Factor. We're going to factor. Very good. And when we're factoring, we want our squared term to be positive. Very good. So we're going to leave the square there, and we're going to move the x and the 2 to the other side. So subtract x, subtract 2. Okay, those eliminate, those eliminate. We have x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. Again, we have an equal sign, so we can solve for x. We're going to find an answer. And how do I end up doing this at this point? Good. Our multiplication term is what? Negative 2, and our adding term is negative 1. So what numbers multiply to be negative 2 and add to be negative 1? Negative 2 and positive 1. Can I use my shortcut on this one? Yes. Okay. And so we end up with x minus 2 and x plus 1, and those we set those equal to 0. And when I set them equal to 0, what do I get? Very good. X equals 2 and x equals negative 1. Now, we know when we're dealing with roots, we always need to do what? Check our answers.
Oh, you right.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to check our answers. So I'm going to start my checking of my answers with the x plus 2. Okay? Or sorry, not x plus 2, x equals 2. So we plug 2 into our equation. We have the square root of 2 plus 2 equals 2. What's 2 plus 2? 4. What's the square root of 4? 2. Does 2 equal 2? Yes, that one checks out. This is an answer. Okay, we also should check x equals negative 1. So x equals negative 1. Square root of negative 1 plus 2 equals negative 1. Now looking at that right there, can I get a square root and equal a negative number? No. So this one's out. So my answer is 2. Are we good so far? All right, so now we're going to go to the other side, and we are going to accurately graph the system of equations, which is from the algebraic equation in part A. So we are graphing 2 different equations. Okay, we are graphing one side, which is the square root of x plus 2, and we are graphing the other side, which is just x. Okay, so this one I think is the easiest to graph. So I'm going to start with this one. Okay, if you were to rewrite this, this is saying y equals x. What would be that starting point? 0, 0, because nothing's being added with the x in parentheses, and nothing's being added at the end. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, and then we should know our slope, and the slope is always the number in front of our x term, and in this case, what is the slope? 1, or 1 over 1. So we're going to make a point at 0, 0, and we go up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, and we go down 1, left 1, down 1, left 1. We try to make it as accurate as possible, and then you would use some sort of straight edge to draw this line. And then I would definitely label that as g of x. That is your g of x equation. I then would probably use a different color, but you don't have to. And we know how to graph this. What is our starting point? -2 for the x and 0 for the y. So -2, 0, here is my point. Oh, wait, that is not my point. Would you guys agree? -2, 0. Are we okay there? This one is not there. Okay. So we are trying to find where they intersect, correct? So I might actually start, we can use any point that we want to, but I'm going to choose values for x that are going to make it easy to see where it's at. What would be a great value for x that would make it easy? Okay, I hear a couple things. I think 2 is easy. -1 would also be easy. So if I chose -1 though, I know that the graph isn't curving down, and so the x value of -1, it's going to give me a value, but it's not going to be helpful to see where it crosses because we know this is going to go up and right. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's try 2. Okay, so I'm going to make like a little t-chart here for x, and we're finding y. I'm going to plug in 2 for x, and when we simplify that, we get the y value. So we have the square root of 2 plus 2. And what is 2 plus 2? 4. And what's the square root of 4? 2. So we went, this ordered pair is 2, 2. Right 2, up 2, and I just happened to choose the right value. Okay, it might not always work out as nicely, but we curve, and do you guys see how they cross there? Okay, so now this is saying f of x, and this is our f of x equation, f of x equals g of x, so it's telling you where do those two graphs cross at x equals what value? So what's the x value? 2. And do you see how this 2 and this 2 match? Yeah. Okay, so this is basically showing you that you can find the answer algebraically, or you could find the same answer graphically. Okay, we're going to do another example. Okay. Now, personally, maybe everybody has different choices, but which way do you guys like solving better? Does anybody like graphing better? No. Miserable. All right. Okay. Well, I'm glad we have that. Okay. So we're going to solve this algebraically. Okay. The root is by itself except for the negative, but we can go ahead and square a negative, right? So to solve algebraically, we're going to square both sides. If you have a negative in front, make sure that you also square the negative. Okay? So you square the negative, and that becomes a positive. We square the square root, which is going to become x plus 1. Okay? Now, over here, we have x plus 1 being squared, which means we have to do what? It's x plus 1 times x plus 1. Can you guys do that in your head now? Some of you? So when you multiply that out, and if you can't do it in your head, that's okay. You can use the distributive and get back to the right answer. But you should end up with x squared plus 1 plus 1 equals 2. So that gives you 2x for your middle term. And then 1 times 1 multiplies to be 1. Okay, so all we're doing is kind of going backwards and finding our adding and multiplying number. Okay, so which way should I move everything? To the right, because we have a squared term, which means it needs to be set equal to 0, and we want our x squared term to be positive. So I'm going to subtract x and subtract 1. We get x squared. 2x minus x is 1x, or just x. And 1 minus 1 is 0. It cancels out. So I really just have x squared plus x equals 0. How do I factor that? You take out a x, a GCF. Very good. So we factor out an x, and when I divide each of these by x, what am I left with? X plus 1. Very good. Equals 0. And when we set those equal to 0, what values do I get? Bless you. X equals 0 and x equals -1. Do we have any questions on any part of that? Yes.
How did you get the 1? Yeah. I don't know.
This one right here. So do you see how this has 2 x's and this has 1 x, correct?
Yeah.
So we have a GCF of x. So when you take out an x, that means you're dividing this by x. Well, x squared divided by x, we can reduce by x, right? And so you have an x left over. And here, x divided by x, they cancel out. And anytime they cancel out, you're left with a 1. Okay? Good. Okay, any more questions there? What do we have to do now?
Check it.
You have to check it, okay? So now we're going to check the answers. I'm going to start with x equals 0 and check that. So we're plugging it into our original equation. So I have negative root 0 plus 1 equals 0 plus 1. 0 plus 1 is what? The square root of 1 is what? But there's a negative in front. So that's -1 equals 1. Does that work? Nope. That's out. That doesn't work. Okay. Now I'm going to check x equals -1. Plug it back in here. Negative root -1 plus 1 equals -1 plus 1. -1 plus 1 is what? 0. And there's no such thing as a -0, so we just get 0 equals, and -1 plus 1 is 0. That one checks out. That is my answer. Do you have questions? Okay. So over here when we're graphing, which one's easiest to start graphing? X plus 1. Okay. What is this starting point on this one? 0, 1. And what is my slope? 1 over 1 or 1? Okay, so let's go ahead and plot this. 0, 1 would be right there. And then using our slope, up 1, right 1, up 1, right 1, or down 1, left 1, down 1, left 1. Use some sort of straight edge to make sure it's pretty accurate. And don't forget to label that this right here is g of x. What will be my starting point for f of x? -1, 0. Also, because this negative is in front, is this one going to be curving up and right or down and right? It's down and right. So this negative means it's going to be curving down instead of curving up. Okay, it's a reflection. Okay, -1, 0. Oh, look at that. I found the point. Do you guys see that? And then since we don't have to have anything else right now, we just know it's going down and to the right because of our negative reflection. And what is the x value where they both intersect? -1. Oops. Okay, do we have questions on this? Okay, so part of your homework is just graphing and solving, okay? So throughout this unit, we've solved algebraically, and then we've graphed algebraically, anyways, okay, I need help. But anyways, we've done it both ways. Then here, you're just going to solve, okay? I don't think we have to do all of these problems, but we'll go ahead and start all of them. We just won't work all the way through. On this one, what would you do first? Very good. You would add 1. So we'd have 1/4 root x plus 11 equals 12. Now, what would we do next with that fraction in the front? You could do that, but in order to just, if we're thinking about just eliminating that fraction, since the fraction has a 4 in the denominator, what would I multiply by? That's a great question. Would you guys agree that it should actually be 2? Okay, good job. Candy for those of you that caught that. I know there are a couple of you. Okay. My contacts aren't working this morning. Okay. What now? Multiply by 4. Okay. Now we're on the same page. Is everybody okay with why we're multiplying by 4? Okay. Yes. Good. Now we have root x plus 11 equals what? 8. To finish this one, what would I do now? Good. Now that your root is by itself, you square both sides. We get x plus 11 equals, and then to solve, what would I do? Subtract 11 to both sides, and x equals 53. What do you always need to do on these? Check. We do not have time, though, today to check them. I'm going to tell you this one checks out. Okay? This is our answer. Okay. All right. So, next problem. The only difference from this one is that we have a cubed root. Do you guys feel like we need to still do this example? A couple of you are saying yes, so I'm going to kind of go through this real quick. What would be your first step? Good. Subtract 4 to both sides. We have 5 cubed root of x minus 1 equals, and 14 minus 4 is 10. What's next? Good. Divide by 5, because we always want to get that root by itself. So now I have the cubed root of x minus 1 equals 2. Good. How do we eliminate a cubed root? You have to cube both sides. Very good. So pay attention to that index. And so when we cube a cubed root, those eliminate. We have x minus 1 equals, and what is 2 cubed? 8. And to solve this, what will I do?
Add 1.
Just add 1. And then we would need to do what? Check. But for time's sake, we're not going to, and I'm going to let you know that it does check out. Okay. All right. This next one I feel is a little bit different. Am I able to get the root by itself? No, because I have 2 roots. I can't add them together because they're not the same stuff inside. It just won't work. So what am I going to have to do? Nope, we still have to solve it.
One of the roots to the side.
Nope. Yeah, so there's really nothing that we can do. Because even if I divide by 3 to both sides, I'm going to get fractions, which are just annoying as well. Okay? So your best option here is just to square both sides. Okay? But when you square both sides, you need to make sure that you are squaring the number in front as well. So when I square that 3, what does it become? 9. When I square the root, what does it become? How will I write that though? Parentheses. Good. 5x plus 1, because we're going to have to end up multiplying through. Okay, remember that I have until 7:50 today. Some of you would look like you're trying to pack up right now. Okay. 4 squared is what?
16.
16. And then what happens with that square root? Parentheses. 3x. Okay? So now, what am I going to do? Distribute. Okay, 9 times 5x is 45x. 9 times 1 is 9 equals 16 times 3x is 48x. 16 times 3 is...
Oh, wait, I typed 16 times 16 times.
All right, good. Thank you for also making a mistake today. Okay, now what? Subtract 45x. We want to get all of our x's together. 9 equals, what's 48 minus 45? 3x, and our last step would be divide by 3, and x equals 3. And guess what? It does check out. Okay. All right, we're going to go down to this problem next down. What am I going to do on this one? Plug it in. Do you see how you have f of x here? They're telling us this is what f of x actually equals. So all we're doing is taking that piece and plugging it in there. So how do I end up writing that? Good. So don't forget that there's that 3 there in front. So we're going to write 3, and then instead of f of x, we're going to write root. Very good. Square root of x plus 8. Good. And then, perfect. Perfect. Do you guys know how to solve this from here? Yeah. We're just going to subtract 2. 3 root x plus 8 equals 15. Next you would divide by 3. Root x plus 8 equals 5. Then we would square both sides. We get x plus 8 equals 25. And then we subtract 8. And what does x equal? And guess what? It does check out. Okay. Last one. Because this one's a little bit more complicated. Do you guys see that? Okay. So, we always look at this. There's like 2 different functions on both sides. Do you guys see that? That looks fun, huh? Okay. So, innermost parentheses you start with first. So, instead of g of x in here, what's going to be there? X plus 2. So just to rewrite this so we can see this a little better, we have f of x plus 2 on one side equals, and then I have g of x minus 2 here. So how would I end up writing that? Do you see this right here? So I'm going to write this as x plus 2 minus 2. Did I have a question back there?
We didn't know where you got the x plus 2, then we saw that you added the x plus 2. We thought you just changed it.
Yeah, so I actually did this before notes started when you guys were talking and not listening to me.
I knew about the first negative. I didn't see you do the second one.
Okay.
So I was on it, okay, Miss Alta?
Not well.
I was on it.
Okay. All right. Anyways, okay. So back to this. F of x plus 2. Okay. We still have to do this. So how am I going to do this? This is my f equation. F is root x. So what does that mean? Square root of x plus 2 equals. Because remember, if this is my, wherever we see x in my f of x equation, we plug in x plus 2. And then over here, what happens? Yeah, so the numbers end up canceling out, and we just have x. And so our last step now is just to square both sides. We have x plus 2 equals, and what is x? Oh, x squared is x squared. Which way will I move everything? To the right, because x squared needs to be positive, and we need it set equal to 0 so that we can factor. That's the word I'm looking for, factor.
Sorry.
It's okay. X squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. What multiplies to be negative 2 and adds to be negative 1?
Negative 2 and 1.
Negative 2, positive 1. We get x minus 2. We get x plus 1 equals 0, which means my values for x are what? Positive 2, negative 1. We always need to check them, and guess what? This one doesn't work.
Oh.
And so the answer is only x equals 2. Yes?
There's some symbolism right there. It's the first problem again. That's some